When he's not launching rockets, the entrepreneur can be found running a futuristic electric car company, selling flamethrowers, plotting a super-fast underground transport system for Los Angeles, and even offering assistance in foreign emergencies.
I grew up with Elon as like a mega hero. I thought what Elon was doing was absolutely incredible for the world.
Why on earth is this 4-year-old girl boarding a bus all alone in the middle of the night?
On a cold, quiet, and dark night when winter was just a few days away, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, met with a little girl of just 5 years old.
The influence of Elon Musk on Britain, the billionaire behind Tesla and X and the mission to colonize Mars.
What happened that night between the busiest man and the little girl at the dimly lit bus stop of Los Angeles is a mystery. Watch the video, as it will surely give you goosebumps. The ordinary Wednesday. It was a quiet Wednesday evening, and Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, stood at a city bus stop, waiting. He had spent the day rushing from one meeting to the next, overseeing SpaceX launches, Tesla updates.
A major milestone for SpaceX with the launch of the world's largest and most powerful rocket yet.
And pushing forward his endless dreams of the future. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, Elon wanted to experience something different. After the whirlwind of his hectic day, he craved something simple. No rocket launches, no deadlines, no meetings. He just wanted to be like everyone else, to experience life without the weight of his fame, his responsibilities, and his grand ambitions. Wearing his signature black hoodie, which had become almost a uniform for him, Elon looked like any other ordinary person waiting for the bus. No one recognized him. No one noticed him. He felt, for the first time in a long while, invisible. His hoodie covered most of his features, and the city street, bustling with the usual after-work rush, paid no attention to the billionaire standing among the crowd. His mind, usually racing with thoughts of Mars, Tesla, and SpaceX, slowed down. He took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air settle his thoughts. He was here, in the midst of the city's noise and energy, waiting for the same bus as everyone else. The simplicity of it all was oddly comforting. The bus. When the bus finally arrived, it was half filled with tired commuters. Elon boarded and found an empty seat in the middle, away from the door but not too far from the windows. The noise of the city outside blended with the quiet hum of the engine. As the bus began to move, he relaxed into the seat, gazing out the window at the familiar sights. The street lights blurred past. The faces of strangers on the bus surrounded him, but none of them paid him any special attention. It was a moment of peace, one he hadn't realized he was craving so deeply. Elon sat back, feeling the weight of the day lifting, even if just for a moment. He let himself get lost in the rhythm of the city, the thrum of the bus as it moved through the streets. He noticed the tired faces around him, people with briefcases, bags, and empty expressions, probably returning from another long day. The noise of the world outside faded into the background as he closed his eyes, letting the quiet of the bus fill his mind. For a few minutes, he was just like everyone else. Then his eyes landed on something at the back of the bus. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, sitting by herself in one of the corner seats. Her eyes were downcast, staring blankly at the worn-out teddy bear she was holding tightly to her chest. Her clothes were too thin for the cold evening, a light pink coat barely covering her tiny frame. She looked small, lost, and alone. Elon felt a sharp tug at his heart as he studied her. She didn't belong on this city bus. The world around her was moving at its usual pace, but here she was, so far out of place. Her face was pale, her eyes empty, as if she had seen too much for someone so young, a fatherly instinct. There was a deep sadness in her expression, one that Elon couldn't shake. Something inside him shifted, a part of him that only a father could understand. His heart tightened, and an instinct he hadn't felt in a long time took over. He needed to make sure she was okay. Without thinking, he looked around the bus, trying to spot any sign of her parents. But the passengers around them were lost in their own worlds, staring at their phones, looking out the window, or reading their books. No one seemed to notice the little girl sitting by herself, clutching her bear in the cold. Elon's gaze returned to her, and he felt a knot in his stomach. Her thin pink coat did little to protect her from the chill of the night air. It was clear she was waiting for someone, but no one had come. She wasn't just any child. She was a child lost in the world, and no one was there to help her. The bus continued its journey toward the last stop. The streets grew quieter, the lights of the city fading into the distance. The bus rattled along, its engine humming steadily. But for Elon, time seemed to slow. His mind, usually so focused on the future, was consumed by thoughts of this little girl. His thoughts on rockets, Mars, and deadlines disappeared, replaced by a single question.
What do you think you're doing with the Mars venture?
Well, the Mars venture, I think, is part of the expansion of consciousness beyond Earth.
Where was her mother? Where was someone who could hold her, protect her, and tell her everything would be okay? When the bus reached its last stop, everything seemed to pause. The doors opened with a hiss, and most of the passengers slowly filed out. The world outside was eerily quiet, with only the sound of the bus's engine and the faint hum of streetlights. The moment. Elon stayed in his seat, his eyes fixed on the little girl. Something inside him urged him to do something. He couldn't just sit there, ignoring her pain, her loneliness. He stood up, walked down the aisle, and knelt in front of her. The girl looked up at him, her big eyes filled with fear and tears. Elon's heart broke as he saw the sadness in her face. He smiled gently, trying to put her at ease. "Hey, sweetie," he said softly. "Is everything okay? What's your name?" For a moment, the little girl just stared at him, unsure whether to trust him or not. She was so small, so fragile. Her tiny fingers clutched the teddy bear tighter, as if it was the only thing holding her together. Finally, in a voice so quiet that Elon could barely hear, she whispered, "Maddie." Elon's heart sank. Maddie. Her name was so simple, so pure, but it carried so much weight. He asked her gently, "Where's your mom, Maddie?" The little girl's face crumpled, and a single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly with the back of her hand, but it was clear she was scared. "She didn't come," Maddie whispered. "I waited, but she didn't come." Elon's chest tightened. There was nothing more important to him right now than finding this little girl's mother. Everything else, the rockets, the missions, the deadlines, faded away. The only thing that mattered was getting Maddie back to her mother, making sure she was safe. Elon turned to the bus driver, who had been quietly watching the exchange from the front. The bus was empty now, just Elon and Maddie left on it. The driver stood up, walking toward them. He glanced at the little girl, then at Elon, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion. "What should we do?" the driver asked quietly. Elon nodded. "We need to call the police," he said. He turned back to Maddie, holding her small hand in his. It was the most comforting thing he could offer her in this moment. The bus driver dialed the police, explaining the situation. Elon stayed by Maddie's side, holding her hand gently. He could feel the warmth of her small fingers wrapping around his, and for a brief moment, he felt a deep connection with this little girl, who was so lost and alone in the world. The police. The night air was still, but the quiet was quickly broken by the arrival of the police car. The sirens had long faded, and only the soft hum of the engine remained. As the car pulled up to the bus stop, a tall, gentle-looking officer stepped out. His uniform was crisp, his face serious, but his eyes held kindness, eyes that seemed to understand the weight of the moment. The officer made his way toward the bus. Elon stood beside Maddie, feeling the tiny hand in his grip, warm yet fragile, a stark contrast to the cold night. The girl, who had been so quiet and withdrawn, looked up at the officer with wide, fearful eyes. Her little body trembled, and Elon could see the fear radiating from her. Without a word, he knelt down before her, his posture relaxed and open, his voice gentle. "Hey there, sweetie," the officer said softly, his eyes meeting Maddie's. "What's your name?" For a long moment, Maddie hesitated. Her little fingers still clutched her worn-out teddy bear tightly against her chest. She looked at the officer, then up at Elon, as if seeking reassurance. Elon gave her hand a gentle squeeze, his thumb brushing over her small fingers. "It's okay, Maddie," he said in a calm voice. "He's here to help. You can trust him." Finally, Maddie spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Maddie," she murmured, her gaze never leaving the officer's face. The officer smiled warmly, giving her a small nod of approval. He turned to Elon, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," the officer said sincerely. "You did the right thing. We'll make sure she gets back to her parents soon." Elon nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief flood through him. As the officer stood up and spoke into his radio, Elon's gaze returned to Maddie. She seemed to shrink into herself, her small body pressed into the seat, still clinging tightly to her teddy bear. Elon could feel the weight of the world on her tiny shoulders, a weight no child should ever have to carry. For a moment, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the bus. Then, as if it had always been there, a thought surfaced in Elon's mind. He had helped so many people in his life, engineers, scientists, innovators. He had changed the course of history, but right now, in this simple moment, there was something extraordinary, a deep, indescribable feeling that made his chest tighten. Elon gently leaned down, lifting Maddie into his arms, holding her carefully but with a sense of protectiveness. She didn't resist, didn't try to pull away. Instead, she clung to him, her small hands gripping his shirt, as if he were the only thing keeping her from floating away into the cold night. She trusted him. The weight of the moment hit Elon like a wave, overwhelming and powerful. Holding this tiny, trembling girl, feeling her trust in him, felt more significant than any achievement or success he had ever known. It was raw, unfiltered, and so incredibly real. It was the kind of connection that transcended everything else. As he stood there, holding Maddie, the quiet of the bus station felt heavy, and yet there was a warmth that seemed to fill the space around them. Elon stood still, breathing in the moment, wondering how many people in the world would have to go through this kind of fear and loneliness. How many children were like Maddie, waiting for someone to notice, to care. The reunion. Just then, another police car pulled up to the bus station. A woman rushed out, her face pale, her eyes filled with panic. She was moving so quickly that it took only a split second for Elon to recognize the unmistakable look of a mother desperate to find her child. "Maddie!" the woman cried, her voice breaking as she ran toward them. Her eyes locked on her daughter, and without hesitation, she reached out her arms. Maddie's small face lit up with relief as she stretched her arms out to her mother. Elon gently placed her in her mother's arms, watching as the two embraced tightly, as if neither one could believe the reunion was real. The mother sobbed, holding her daughter close, her hands shaking with emotion. "Thank you," she said through tears. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done without you." Elon stood back, his heart heavy but warm, watching the emotional exchange. This moment, this simple act of kindness, was worth far more than any rocket launch or technological breakthrough. He had helped a little girl find her way back to her mother, and for the first time in a long while, Elon realized that this was what truly mattered. The mother looked at Elon, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "I had to rush to a medical emergency," she explained, her voice filled with guilt. "I told Maddie to wait near the bus stop, but I didn't make it back in time. She must have gotten scared and boarded the bus on her own." Her voice cracked, and she wiped her eyes, trying to steady herself. "I work 2 jobs, one during the day, one at night. It's hard, but I do it for her. My husband, he passed away a few months ago. I just didn't want to lose her too." Elon felt a sharp pang in his chest as he listened to the woman's story. He had heard about people working multiple jobs, about the struggles they faced to survive. But hearing it from this mother, seeing the weight of her life in her eyes, was something entirely different. A new beginning. He stood silently for a moment. Then, without thinking, his voice steady but filled with emotion, he said, "Don't worry about your living. I'll help you. I'll make sure Maddie has a future, a safe place, a home where you don't have to worry about the next meal or paying the bills." The woman blinked, staring at him as if she hadn't heard him right. Her face softened as she wiped away another tear. "You would do that?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. Elon nodded, his eyes serious. "Yes, I will. You and Maddie shouldn't have to struggle like this. I can help." Tears filled the woman's eyes again as she looked down at her daughter, who was now nestled in her arms, safe and sound. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Elon stood there, watching the reunion, feeling something he couldn't quite explain. He had given them a chance at a life where they didn't have to worry constantly. The woman's sobs came in waves as she clutched her daughter tightly, her body trembling with relief. Thank you so much," she whispered between her sobs, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved our lives. I don't know what I would have done without you. You're my angel. Thank you." Her words were desperate, as if she couldn't say them enough. Elon stood there, his heart heavy, watching the mother and daughter in their embrace. He could feel the depth of her gratitude, and yet, in that moment, he realized that what he had done wasn't just a favor. It had been an absolute lifeline. It wasn't just about the house he would offer them. It was about giving them peace of mind, something they hadn't had in so long. The mother pulled herself back slightly, still holding Maddie close. She wiped her eyes, trying to steady her breath. "I'm so sorry for making you worry," she said, her voice trembling. "I had to rush to the hospital. My mother was in an emergency. She's sick. I told Maddie to wait near the bus stop, but when I got there, I couldn't find her. I panicked when I didn't see her." Her voice faltered as she glanced down at her daughter, her hands gently smoothing Maddie's hair. "I should have been there. I should have been with her." Elon's heart sank as he listened to the woman's story. He could hear the pain in her voice, the guilt. She had been doing everything she could to keep things together, and yet life kept throwing obstacles at her. "I work 2 jobs, you know," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "One during the day, one at night. I barely get enough time to sleep, but it's the only way to keep a roof over our heads. And then, my father, he passed away just a few months ago from cancer. Maddie doesn't even know how much I've been struggling. I have to be strong for her, but it's so hard." The woman's words were filled with exhaustion, and her shoulders slumped under the weight of her life. Elon's chest tightened as he heard her story. It was a harsh reminder of the struggles that so many people face every day. He looked at Maddie, her small face still pressed against her mother's chest, clinging to the warmth of the only stability she had left. His mind raced as he thought of all the children like Maddie, children who had to grow up too fast, who had to endure the loneliness of being left behind while their parents struggled to survive. He couldn't shake the image of Maddie's lonely face on the bus, clutching her worn teddy bear. It was something no child should ever feel, the absence of love, of care, of security. But here she was, with her mother, safe and sound once more, thanks to a chance encounter that had saved her from what could have been an even darker fate. Elon stepped closer to the woman, his voice steady but filled with empathy. "Don't worry about your living," he said softly, his gaze never leaving Maddie. "You shouldn't have to work so hard. You shouldn't have to be alone. I can help. I can give you a home, a place where you don't have to struggle anymore. I'll take care of your bills and your future so that you can focus on being a mother to Maddie. The rest of her life will be secure." His words hung in the air, raw and honest, as if he had just spoken the most natural thing in the world. The woman stared at him, her face frozen in disbelief. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to comprehend what he was saying. "You would do that for us?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Elon nodded, his eyes filled with genuine warmth. "Yes, you deserve to have peace of mind. Maddie deserves to grow up in a home where she feels safe and loved. I want to make that happen for you both." Elon felt something stir inside him. He had helped build rockets that would take people to Mars, but here, in this small, dimly lit bus stop, he realized that the real change, Real impact didn't come from reaching for the stars. It came from the moments when you reached for people who needed help, people who just wanted a chance to live without constant fear of what the next day would bring. He placed a hand on the woman's shoulder, offering her a smile that was full of compassion. "No one should have to go through what you've been through," he said quietly. "I'll make sure Maddie has everything she needs." For a long moment, the three of them stood there together, a small family reunited after a moment of fear and uncertainty. It was hard to imagine the kind of life the woman had endured, but at least now she didn't have to carry it alone. At least now there was someone who would help her shoulder the weight. Share your thoughts about Elon Musk in the comment section. See you in the next video.